Alright, so this video is over pie charts and how pie charts work with percentages. So it's pie charts with percentage values. So finding percents or working backwards from percents. Alright, so a pie chart, if you don't know, a pie chart is used to display how, when we have a full group of things, how they relate to one another. Alright, so when we're looking at an entire group, 100%, so when we're breaking down 100% of outcomes into different, what we call pieces of the pie, wedges of the pie. Alright, so the pie represent 100% of the group, and then we're splitting the group up into wedges, which represent smaller parts of the 100%. Alright, so it's a circular region divided into slices of the pie that represents the whole. Again, the slices are the individual parts, the individual percents, and when we add them up, it should always represent 100%. Alright, the whole represents 100%. Alright, so an example that I'm going to set up with a pie is, suppose that I have grades, and how many frequency would be the number of students, right, that have the grade. So A, there are 12, B, there are 18, C, there are 24, D, there are 15, and F, there are 6. First thing we want to find is the relative frequency. Relative frequency. Right, the relative frequency is the fraction of those in an A, the fraction of those in a B, the fraction of those in a D, and the fractions of those in an F. And so to do this, you have to take your frequency divided by your total. Alright, and so what we need to know is, well, we need to know the total number of students. Alright, that's the total we're talking about. Frequency divided by total. Alright, so we have to add them up. So total number of students would take our 12 plus our 18 plus our 24 plus our 15 plus our 6. So the total number of students adds up to be, there are 75 total. That would be 100% of the class should add up to 75 students. And so when we do our relative frequency, it's the fraction of those that we're looking for. And so the relative frequency of A, well, there's 12 out of 75. That's the relative frequency for A. For B, there are 18 out of 75. C, there are 24 out of 75. And D, there are 15 out of 75. So again, relative frequency is how many out of the total. The fraction of the total, 6 would be 6 out of 75. So when I add those all up, it should be 75 students out of 75 students, right, if we add them up. All right, then we'll write them as a percentage. And so to get to the percentage, you take your relative frequency, divide it out, and then multiply by 100%. So you actually do the fraction, you do the division, and then multiply by your 100%. That's the percent change, right? The percent of. Change. The percent of A, the percent of B, the percent of Z. And so you're going to take 12 divided by 75, which comes out to 0.6, multiplied by 100. So 16% of the students are A. 18 divided by 75 times 100. 24% are B. 24 divided by 100 comes out to be 32% are in the C range. 15 divided by 75. I think I had 100. 24 divided by 75 is 32. 15 divided by 75 is 20. And 6 divided by 75 comes out to 8%. Again, if you add these up, it should add up to the total class, which should add up to 100. It does. If you add up all the percents, it should add up to the total. Because when we go to draw the example, I already have it drawn for you, but these are where the percentages come from. Alright, so then we go represent this as a pie chart. Alright, so we represent the grades as a pie chart. And so typically in a pie chart you will do different colors for the different regions. And so the entire circle is the 100%, right? The entire circle would add up to 100%. And then the wedges represent the fraction of 100. And so the wedges should represent the same ratio. So if it's a circle, that's 100%. Half of the circle would be 50%. A quarter of the circle should be 25%. So again, your wedges should match up. Alright, so again, 32% is about a third, and so that green wedge looks like it does look like it comes out to be about a third. The 24%, which are your B's, is almost a quarter. It should look like it's a quarter wedge. The 20% of your D's, which again is slightly less than a quarter, it should represent that. 16% is less than the D, so it should represent that. And then the F should be a very small wedge, should be your smallest wedge. So the wedges should be the same percent of the pie. The area they take up, I guess I should say, the area they should take up should represent the same percent of the pie. And there are programs that do that for you. You can draw pie charts in Word or Excel, and they'll, if you put the percents in there, as long as the percents add up to 100%, they'll actually draw the picture for you. All right, next example. If we're given a pie chart, all right, suppose that we're given the following pie chart, and we want to find some information on it. And there's an example like this in your homework that you need to know how to do. All right, so the pie chart below shows the government revenue in a country, so it's just a random country, because we get way more in revenue than what this is. This is it would be a fairly middle-sized country. All right, so the total amount of federal revenue, which again comes from taxes, the government is paid for the amount of money the government spends is paid for by your taxes. All right, so the total amount the federal revenue for this particular country was $3.2 trillion. That $3.2 trillion comes from taxes. 47% comes from income, taxing what you make. 33% comes from the payroll tax. That's the again, corporate tax is 12%, and then other random taxes is 8%. Right? And so here's the what pie. And so the pie, they've broken it down, they didn't put the percents in. All right, so the red represents income, and it should represent accurately almost half the pie, right? Because this was 47%. The payroll tax is about a third. Actually, it's almost exactly a third, and again, that wedge does represent a third. The corporate income tax is much less than that. That's 12. So again, it should be the slightly bigger pie of the two ones that are remaining. So the 12% is the green. And then the last one, I should have picked a different color than blue, would be the other tax. So this is the 8% that represents the other and adds up. If you add them up, this is 100% of the taxes. All right? So that's how the pie is broken down. What we want to know is, well, we're going to work backwards. So the first example, we found the percents. All right, we found the percents and worked, how many. We found the frequency fraction, the relative frequency fraction, and then the percent. This one we're going to work backwards. Given the percent, how much of the total lands in each group? All right, so we want to figure out how much. We know it's 47% of the total. Well, how much is 47% of the total? We know payroll tax is 33% of the total. Well, how much is 30% of the total? All right, so we know 100%, which is my total, was $3.2 trillion. We want to know how much of that so again, it should add up. When I get my numbers, when I add them up, they should add up to 3.2 trillion, no more, no less. All right, it should be the exact same amount. All right, so in order to figure this out, what you do, right, we want to find the percent of, well, you take the percent in each group, change it to a decimal, all right, which would be the income tax would change to 0.47, the payroll tax would change to 0.33. You would divide out by the 100%. The corporate tax would be 0.12, and the other tax it would be 0.008, because you take 8% divide. Again, you take the percent divided by 100% to get your decimal. All right, so those would be the decimals. And so in order to figure this out, you're going to take the total, multiply it by the percent as a decimal. And you do have to make sure you multiply it by the decimal, not the percent. All right, so first we'll start with the income. Income tax. How much of the 3.2 trillion? Well, it's almost half of it. So I know the number should come out to close to half of it, but slightly less because it's 47%. Well, you take the percent, which is 0.47%, multiply it by the total, and I'm going to use $3.2 trillion. So 4.47 times 3.2 comes out to be 1.504, and remember it's in trillions of dollars. So almost 1.5, but I'm going to leave it exact. It's exactly $1.504 trillion. So of the and if you can check your answer, take that 1.504 and divide it by the total, you should get 47%. All right, so working now. So we've done the income one. Let's do the payroll. Well, the payroll was 0.33 as a percent, 33%, but as a decimal. Multiplied it by our total, $3.2 trillion. So 0.33 times 3.2 comes out to be 1.056, and I'm going to leave it exact, trillion dollars. So of the 3.2, 1.056 trillion of it comes from the payroll tax. All right, corporate tax. All right, corporate makes up 12%. So as a decimal, that's 0.12, and you multiply it by your 3.2 trillion. And so corporate should be much smaller, and it is 0.384 trillion dollars. So it's 384 billion, in case you wanted to know, but we'll leave it in trillions. And the last one, because it asked for it in trillions, other tax, which was 8%. Remember, 8%, 0.08, not 0.8. If it was 0.8, it would be 80. 0.08 trillion dollars. And again, that should come out much smaller. It does 0.25. Much smaller, but it's still in billions. Right? 8% of a trillion is still $250 billion, right? A trillion is a large chunk of cash. If you add those up, it should add up to your total 3.2 trillion. Right? That's sort of your check, right? If you add up every single one of those, the income, the payroll, the corporate, the other, it should add up to your 100 that represents 100%, right? And it does. If you add them all up, it adds up to 3.2 trillion. All right, the last example is kind of doing a bar graph and a pie graph, kind of drawing them out. Again, you won't have to draw them by hand because this is an online class. You'll have to pick the right one, right? So the right one you'll have to choose. It'll be a multiple choice. Alright, so the following table shows the ingredients, hypothetical. It's made up, so it's actually one I pulled from the book. For a cake as a percent by total weight. So it's given to you by weight. The flour weighs so much, the milk weighs so much, the sugar weighs so much, the eggs weigh so much. Alright, so we've got flour is 50% of the weight, milk is 25% of the weight, sugar is 15% of the weight, and eggs is 10%. So again, this is just made up numbers. This should add up to 100% of the weight, and it does, right? Because we have to have 100%. Alright, so the first thing is we want to sketch the bar graph and then the pie chart. So I'm going to start off by sketching the bar graph. And so again, I'm going to mark off my percent. So this is going to represent my percent. And I do want to go up to 100%. So you can compare it to 100%. And then this is just going to label my ingredients. Percent, ingredients. Alright, so I've got my flour, milk, sugar, and eggs. And then I'm going to go by 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. 100% is as far as I'll go. So it goes by tens. 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Alright, flour makes up half of it, so 50%. So I just draw my bar. And again, what you try to do is you try to draw your bar the same width just to make it look nice. So flour's at 50%. Milk, I'm going to do the same thing. It goes up to 25%, so halfway between 2 and 30, so somewhere around there. Milk. And I said draw it the same, but again, it's hard to do. I made it a little wide. I'll try to go a little lighter on that one. Sugar makes up 15%, so 15% would be halfway between 10 and 20. Somewhere around there, sugar. And egg is 10%, so not much less than, but should be slightly less than the milk. And there's my rough sketch of my pie chart, bar graph. So there's my bar graph. Now my pie chart. Now I'm just going to draw it here because I think it's just easier to do that. I am going to use different colors. So I'm going to start off with drawing the circle the best I can, which represents 100% of the weight. Alright, then I'm going to split it into 50%. Alright, 50% represents the flour. 25%, so that should be a single wedge, 25% makes up the milk, so flour and milk. Sugar is 15, so I would break this wedge, it's, one of them should be slightly bigger than the other, so it's not quite in half, you should go slightly less than half. That would be 15%, and that should be 10%. Alright, so if I kind of do colors, because we typically do colors with the, so we'll do eggs yellow, so that's the 10% here. We'll do sugar as pink, milk as blue, and flour. Actually, flour I'll just leave white. Flour is white. Alright, so flour is the white. And so there, again, the wedges should sort of represent, 50% should represent 50% of the circle, 25% should represent 25% of the dirt, 15% should represent 15. Again, like I said, you're not going to have to draw these by hand. You're going to have to pick them out of which one of these is the best representation. Alright, so that's how you're going to have to do it. Alright, we will stop there. One more section. Or no, that's it. And we're done with the 2.3.